Yo, what's up? It's Jimmy on from Glitchy Thumbs. We have character 2.3 today, creating it in Blender. I hope you've been enjoying the previous characters. If you haven't already, check out those videos. If you haven't subscribed, please do, because it definitely helps me out. Also, let me know what you think about my workflow process so far. I'm going to be changing up a few things in the video. If you see me skipping some parts in this video, that's because I probably explained it multiple times. I think it's just repetitive to do that. I'm trying to change it up a bit as I go, just going with the flow of things, just explaining more of my thought process. Hopefully that will make everything much faster so that I can narrate more of the characters that I've been working on. I'm definitely behind, but then again, I still think I'm on time, which is a little bit weird. Anyways, let's get to the blended portion for character 2.3. Let's go to the video. Character 2.3, you can see in the reference, he's a little bit larger than most of the other characters, takes up a lot of room. It's just in a weird angle because he should be upright. I have no idea what to call this character. If you have a name for them, please let me know in the comments. I'll just refer to it as character 2.3 as I'm blocking it out. This is using the plane method that I'm normally using, where I start with a plane and then just extrude out. This time, instead of going in sections, I just extrude along plane and then make loop cuts. That way is much easier, and you don't have to do it one by one like I was doing in the previous videos. The goal here is just to extrude up until the end of the reference. That's pretty self-explanatory just by watching the videos. If you haven't watched the previous videos, please do so. I definitely go into more depth into the previous characters because that's how I started my process. But now I want to change it up a bit, just focus on trying to get the smaller details explained for most of the characters and avoid anything that's somewhat repetitive, like I mentioned. You can see I'm getting more comfortable with this plane process in terms of extruding. Before, I was trying to align everything as I extruded, which was doing too many things at once. Now the focus here is just to get the plane mapped out to the reference, just aligning any large vertices as best as we can to match the character. Once we're done laying down the foundation, then you start making some loop cuts to get more of an accurate shape. That way we can align the outer vertices to actually match the reference. If you want your character to be more rounded, that's when you would add the loop cuts, because it gives you an extra vertex. That keeps everything more rounded so that you can actually get very close to your reference. I'm making more loop cuts to cut out all the dead space. You can see close to the eye, it's not really rounded here, so that would be a good place to add a loop cut, and you can drag that vertex out. That keeps everything more aligned to our reference. That's entirely up to you. If you want a more rounded character, you can still have it with sharp corners like that, but for me, I want these characters to be pretty accurate based off of the reference. As I'm watching these videos, I'm definitely seeing a difference in my workflow process on how I started blocking out my characters. I definitely noticed that it's much easier to have all the faces on the screen and just either align the vertex and then delete or cut out all the dead space, which is like the outer part of the character, which I have a lot here in character 2.3. Sometimes you're going to get an area where you feel like there's a missing piece, and you can actually just select all the vertices like I am near the eye and press F, which is to fill in the polygon. That pretty much works as well. I don't know if there's a better way to do it, but that's just how I do it to fill in any areas that I feel like are missing some polygons. It looks like I'm actually aligning the vertices in character 2.3. I know in the current characters that I'm working on, since these are older videos, I changed the method where I actually knife into the shape like I'm doing here with this little triangle, but I actually do it around the entire character. When we get to that portion, you'll definitely see differences in my process on how I'm creating the shape of these characters and how I get to the final 3D model. It's just minor things that I'm changing because some things are more efficient than others. It's all experimental. The beginning characters are obviously going to be a lot of trial and error, when I get to more complex characters, by that time, I should be able to make them without any issues. I'm using all of these characters that I came up with to help me learn little by little and just get better by 1% every day, since I try my best to create one new character a day, but sometimes some of the characters take longer than others. That's because I stumble upon something and it catches my interest, and I focus on getting that character right, but also there are times when I'm spontaneous and I want to try something new with each character, and that's when I get into some sort of flow where I'm trying something new and it's never been done before, or it's been done before but it's just more refined, and then I end up just focusing on that and trying to make sure I capture that on video to document that part of the process. So a lot of things has changed in my process. So when I watch some of these videos like I'm doing with character 2.3, I feel like this is a little bit inefficient right now because I'm removing certain faces on the plane at the moment, and that creates odd things in your mesh. There's just better ways of doing it now, at least in my perspective. Hopefully in the next character we get to that part. And again, I don't watch my videos before I actually go and narrate them. I just turn the mic on and then just scrub through the entire screen recording, and whatever I see that catches my attention is whatever I'm going to narrate or explain, because there is definitely a lot of things that I did on each character that I would like to refer back to, but I don't know exactly what I did for each character. But in order to know what I did, I have to watch my videos now and then narrate them. Yeah, it's a really weird process. I don't know how many other people are doing it, but that's just how I do it. Since I listen to music when I'm creating these characters in Blender and then using them in Buildbox, I'm not really writing things down as I go. I'm just in my creative flow when I make my characters and try to come up with something fun for my game mechanics, or just coming up with some sort of cool game idea. Blocking out the character takes a bit of time to do, but this is actually a good time for me to get my thoughts out as I'm watching this, because there's not much to it other than extruding, doing loop cuts, aligning vertices, using a knife tool if you need to make manual loop cuts like I'm doing in the middle of character 2.3, but that's about it. You just need to follow your reference and make sure that the shape matches the sketch and you'll be just fine. Most of these characters are brand new. I've never seen them before because I recently drew them. They're all original. They're all unique in their own way. So I feel the need and the desire to actually create each and every one of them because I want to see what I actually come up with for each of the characters. It was pretty cool to actually sketch them out like I did in Procreate. I spent pretty much every day drawing a new character set just to see what I would sketch. I should have those videos out in the link below if you guys are curious how I came up with these characters. They all pretty much came from Scribbles, but those scribbles are still lines. When I look at the lines, I actually visualize a character, and that's pretty much what came out when I outlined them and shaded them with my Apple Pencil. I did this all on my iPad in Procreate, so it was definitely fun to create these characters. I didn't want to just leave them in my iPad as just a bunch of sketches that end up not going anywhere. So I had the idea to actually just create them in Blender now in 3D form. So that's what I've been working on recently, is just creating all of these characters in Blender. That's been my huge focus, and I'm actually enjoying the process because I'm learning a lot on how to create these characters, and it allows me to use them in Buildbox. These are all original characters anyways, so there's no issues of copying other characters. I guess I always liked original ideas because if it's original, there's nothing like that out there in the world. There might be some similarities, but then it's original work that you came up with, it's original art that you came up with, and it just matches my style. I'm very spontaneous on what I do daily because I don't have an actual plan on what I'm going to be doing for the day. I just know that today we're going to be working on character, whatever number it is, and whatever I come up with is whatever I come up with. So that's part of my creative process. I'm trying to do this quick so my brain can do it on autopilot. For each character, it should know, okay, you need to create it in Blender, but also you need to do it as quick as possible. But also if you find an improvement in your process, definitely do it. But if you think of something else that's going to be different for all the future videos, definitely do that too. There's a lot of things that kind of fire in my brain as I'm making all these characters because I'm just learning so much all at once. It's exciting just to do something new, something creative, something different from my original ways of making games. So that's pretty much what's kind of like feeding my determination and my desire. I built this habit of creating these characters every day. I disciplined myself to actually wake up and do this. So every morning, this is pretty much on my mind as soon as I wake up. If I don't wake up in the morning to create these characters, then I pretty much missed a day of creating a new character. And that kind of puts me behind, you can say. But then again, it's just all perspective. Like, am I really behind or am I on time? So it really depends on how you see it. Like for me, I feel really, really good about all these characters that I'm creating. It's been a pretty fun journey so far. Creating them in Blender, creating them in build blocks, learning new things, trying to get to a full game because I haven't built one in a very long time. So it's exciting to get to that point, but it's definitely a process because it was definitely much easier when I was younger. I had a little bit more energy. I didn't need as much sleep. But now that I'm a little bit older, you can't really do the same thing that I did before where I had sleepless nights, talking to designers and programmers overseas late night to actually finish a game because that's the time zones they were in. That was the time that we would usually meet. So I definitely can't do that anymore because I definitely need my sleep. The amount of things that I'm doing now definitely requires a lot of energy throughout the day, not physical, but more mental. When you use a lot of mental energy, very exhausting, and I definitely don't want to burn myself out. Try my best to get as much done in different pockets of time throughout the day. I've built certain times that I do things. In the morning is creating new characters in Blender, where I do the blocking out, UV unwrap, texture paint, rigging, animation. If I can do that in one day, that would be perfect. But that's in the morning though, pretty much before lunch. After lunch is when I'll narrate all these videos. I'll go through all the videos to see what I actually worked on for these characters and explain as much as I can about the thought process for these characters. But also if I learn something new, I definitely want to explain that in tutorial form because that's going to be super useful, not only for me, but also for a lot of you guys. That creates a reference point for me. If I need to refer back to anything that I stumbled upon in my new characters, then I'll know how to fix it, or I'll know the certain method that I use. All right, back to the video. We're done blocking out character 2.3. I add this to a new collection, character 2.3, trying to keep myself on track here. I definitely go off on a tangent, but that's fine. That's the whole point of the creative process and the whole thought process is to get my ideas out. And then I'll review these videos as well at a future time. It'll be pretty cool to rewatch this entire journey from the beginning whenever I finished all of these character sets. The shape of character 2.3 came out pretty good. That's definitely super accurate, as you can see, against the reference. You might be thinking, what the heck is he gonna do with this character? It's definitely super long. It's unusual and it's different from all my other characters because I normally have them facing left to right or right to left. This one's actually facing down, but I didn't want to move the reference around, or I already started blocking it out the way it is. So I might as well just do it this way and then rotate it to the side if we want him to be upright, which he's going to be for the game mechanic, because there's no way we can have this character the way it is because it will take up way too much room. That's a little foreshadow for you that the character is going to be upright instead of sideways like this. My format's constantly changing for all of these videos. If you want more of a tutorial type of video for some of these characters, you can just leave that in the comments and I'll definitely consider it maybe in some of the character videos. Some of them I'm going to continue to do thought process. I just feel like it's more natural for me to do more thought process videos. It's just more free. I can talk about whatever comes to mind. This looks super different in the video for character 2.3. For the end edges around the tail, it looks like I'm doing an edge slide, and the edge slide gives it a little bit more curvature. I think this is something I haven't done before for my previous characters. Normally I just pull out the edges based on the column or based on the row, but this time this is around the outer part of the character. This is a pretty cool way to add some curvature around the character. I think the hotkeys are pressing G and then G again, and it'll allow you to edge slide. But for me, I was using the gizmo, so I'm actually pressing W and then I press G. That gets me into edge slide. That's a new thing to do with your characters if that's something that you're looking for. And it's always good to add curvature to your mesh. It gives it a better 3D feel. It definitely makes the character stand out a little bit more. I think the shortcut add-on doesn't show the hotkeys for the edge slide. I'm not sure why, but that's what I see in the video because I don't see the actual buttons that I'm clicking. I'll definitely have to try it out with some future characters to see if that's just an issue with the shortcut, but edge slide is just pressing G twice and you'll get in that mode. That allows you to just slide your edges across your 3D model without stretching the shape. It will slide across your mesh and then you can get pretty cool curvature. If you need to fix anything, you can just align the single vertices. You can see it's giving us this cool curvature to character 2.3. This just makes the character kind of pop out more. It's just some details to add to your character. You could leave it just flat like I've always been doing it for my previous characters, where I'll just pull out the edges. It'll still come out 3D, but for this adds a little bit of flair to your characters. At least that's how I see it. This is definitely something new that I'm trying in this video because I haven't seen it in the previous videos. It's always been pretty much the same process. I'm not sure if I've learned this looking at other 3D models or I just wanted to try something new on that day. This is what I've been talking about, is every video there should be something new that I learned that I've been trying to do with each character. Character 2.3 has this edge slide as part of the curvature to the character. So it's pretty cool to be able to see this as I'm narrating character 2.3. The curvature using the edge slide is a good place to put some shading later on in texture paint. You'll definitely see me doing that. We're definitely going to be marking the seams around the edge slide areas. You'll definitely understand why I cut character 2.3 the way I cut it by marking the seams. So far, when you look at character 2.3, you can see there's like a main color, but then there's also this shaded area where the edge slide is. That definitely defines the 3D shape a little bit more for character 2.3. I don't use this method a lot, I don't think. Possibly I do. It's quite possible that I might be using this in the next characters after this video, but I just forgot. Like, it's been a while since I last recorded these videos. You're definitely not gonna remember all the stuff that you did. This character kind of looks like Mew or a variation of it from Pokemon. I mean, I see the resemblance. It could possibly be an abstract version of it. Maybe I saw it during the day I was creating the sketch of this character, but I'm not too sure. There's definitely characters in my character sets that resemble a lot of things that I saw either throughout the week or throughout the day. They just are more of a abstract version of it. So sometimes that happens. It's just interesting how the mind works. I select all these edges to pull out the shape. It definitely gives us more of that curvature towards the end, but it's still flat on the front part of our character. This is definitely a new way to pull out the character, because normally when I select multiple edges, it comes out super flat. But since we already have the curvature from around character 2.3, it actually works out doing it this way. But of course, it's always better to pull it out one by one for specific edge loops. That way you have a little bit more control of that area of the character. I've been using a cube and a subdivision surface modifier lately. That's the different method that I'm testing out at the moment, other than the plane method that I've been doing for my previous characters and also this character. Blocking it out with the plane, using the mirror modifier to create the 3D shape, and then pulling out each edge loop to create some curvature. Now also the edge slide to add on to creating the curvature. You can see when I'm comfortable with a certain workflow, I end up adding on something new to see if it will enhance my characters. And if they do, most likely I keep the new workflow as my framework. But if it takes way too much time adding on this additional feature, then I'll definitely ignore it and probably try something new, but probably stick to a previous way of doing things just to keep my timing on point. But I can tell you, all the characters that I've been working on, they've actually been taking pretty long time time. Not that I'm doing a lot more to them. Maybe I'm doing a lot more to them. There's definitely times where I'm in my flow and I complete the character and I don't realize that, oh shoot, I just legit worked 2 hours on this portion. It just happens to be that way sometimes. I don't really look at the time as I'm working. I just kind of start at a certain time, and then whenever I finish with a certain part of the character, then I'll stop the timer. Most of this is going to be sped up anyways. It's like a time lapse. So then everything's kind of more condensed for you guys to watch. Otherwise, you're going to be watching like hours and hours, which I'm pretty sure you guys don't want. But those videos are available if you are interested in seeing the longer versions of this. But most of the time, it's going to be sped up. It's important to just get the thought process down and the method as quick as possible so that you can spend more time actually working on your own projects and less time watching my content. Most of this content is for me to refer back to, but you know, some people might like watching. You guys are more than welcome to do that. You can see pulling it out one by one just definitely gives you more control to create the 3D curvature that you want. And so far this is turning out pretty good. I remember character 2.3. I actually really like how this 3D model came out. Like, it looks pretty good the way it is, except some of the topology is a little bit off near the neck, but that's okay. And I definitely feel a little bit of low energy today. That's because it's Thursday and we're getting close to the end of the week. We're almost done blocking out character 2.3. We just need to add the eyes now since we're finished with the body. The UV sphere is normally what I would use for the eye, but I'm not too sure if I did, but I don't think I used it for character 2.3. It just didn't fit based on the 3D model, but also it doesn't look like the reference either. So definitely this is where I wanted to create my own eyes using the plane method, of course. This gives you more accuracy if you do it this way, because you can create any shape that you want. That's why I love using the plane. We're at around 1 hour and 8 of the blocking out portion near the eye. So I'm just going to stop it here. We can continue on. All right, where did I leave off? I'm making the eyes for character 2.3, and I left off on making loop cuts. I've already cut out the shape, and now I'm making loop cuts so that we can pull them out to get more curvature. That's definitely a weird edge loop that I'm creating on the far right, and I decided to dissolve that. We definitely didn't need that. Sometimes you can go through your shape and look for vertices or edges or faces that you don't need, and you can dissolve them so that it makes a much more cleaner 3D mesh. When you're modeling your 3D object, sometimes you're just creating a whole bunch of vertices and edges, and you don't really need all of it to get the exact shape that you want. So it's okay to dissolve them if you need to. It looks like I'm doing a lot of edge slides on the far edge loops now. This is most likely when I decided to introduce them into my 3D models, because I don't remember doing them in the previous characters from all the videos that I've been making. It definitely looks new to me because I haven't talked about it much. I think this might be the first time I mentioned about edge slides, because in the beginning when I was learning how to block out my characters and create them, I tend to focus on the simplest thing first before adding on. That's why you see me introducing the edge slides now. And also a little bit of aligning of the vertices to get more vertical and horizontal lines versus having them all over the place, I guess. This eye kind of looks like one of the watermelon Sour Patches, which is actually one of my favorite candies. So if you like that, hit the like button and leave a comment and say watermelon Sour Patches. I don't know why I was thinking about that. I haven't eaten that in a very long time. Maybe I should go get some later on today after I finish this video. I might be able to reuse that 3D model to make watermelon Sour Patch art of some sort. Maybe I'll try to do that because of this video. I guess I really like the edge slide because it gives you the curvature, but also it gives you some sort of shading for your 3D model, as if the light is facing the top left and then you have the shading under the eye. That's how I'm visualizing it. The way it's looking right now, trying to find a comfortable position to sit and talk. Yeah, I've been trying to think about my 3D models on what I can maybe reuse, because a lot of them are characters. So the only time I'll be able to reuse them is if a certain game mechanic is able to use them, depending on their animations, on how they look. But some features, like the eyes, I can definitely reuse them for future characters, and that would definitely save me a lot of time. So quite possibly I might need to make a spreadsheet of different separate objects that I can reuse for future characters. If the characters share a similar object size for like the eyes, I guess I can just reuse them. Most of the time I'm using the UV sphere, so that's definitely one that I can reuse for multiple characters. This is the first time I'm doing a different variation of an eye because of the way it was drawn in my sketch, and it just looks better for this character if we just do it this way. As I've been modeling more 3D characters, I've definitely been aligning most of the vertices as best as I can. I'm not sure why my brain kind of does that. It wants to organize it so that the lines are straight. I don't know why that happens. I can definitely just leave them the way they are, because we know I can just shade smooth and it'll pretty much look exactly the same, but for some reason, that kind of bothers me when I look at it. I guess that's getting to the part of being a perfectionist, maybe? I'm still trying to look past that. I know there are times when I do it, but then sometimes it's just unconscious. Sometimes it's just on autopilot. I'm not really thinking about aligning. It just so happens that, hey, let's move these vertices so that there's some sort of curve or some sort of straight line. I guess that's just how my brain thinks. Not sure if a lot of people think like that, but I'm pretty sure some people do. If you do, hit that like button, because organizing and aligning is a pretty good trait to have, because then that definitely spills over into your personal life, because you'll be able to organize your room, organize your desk, organize whatever it is in your room that's messy or cluttered. I've actually been doing a lot of that in my own life, actually. Getting rid of the clutter, organizing everything, getting much more clarity and a clear mind so that I can focus on being creative and keeping my space clean and open so that I have an open mind as well. So a lot of those things I've been implementing in my own life. But I can definitely tell making characters in Blender is definitely spilling over in reality for me. I think that's a good thing. It looks like I decided to make the right eye as well as a separate object. I normally just duplicate the 3D object and then just reuse them, but I guess this one in particular had to have a specific eye for both sides just so that it matches the sketch a little bit more. This definitely changes the content around because I'm always using the UV sphere, and you guys already know that if you've been watching all of my videos. At least this is showing you guys how to make a different variation of the eyes using the plane method, which is what we normally use for the body of the character, but this is being applied to a different part of the character. So that just means you can make pretty much anything using the plane method. It's just a little bit tedious to do it because there's steps to it where you create the plane and then you do loop cuts and then you align the outside vertices to match the reference, and then you extrude to create half the width, and then you delete the middle faces, and then you do the mirror modifier to mirror to the other side, and then you have clipping on so that the middle vertices can actually connect to each other. And then for the edge loops around the shape, you do an edge slide to get more of the curvature, and then you pull out the edge loops that are in front by columns or by rows, depending on whichever you start with, and then you pretty much have your 3D model. That's one way to do it. You know, that's been my go-to method, which has been my only method so far, but I've been experimenting with my current characters using a new method, so you'll definitely be able to see that when I catch up to those videos. I know there's videos coming up where we're going to be adding a more humanoid body soon, so that's definitely something I'm excited about when we get to that part, because then it allows you to create a different style of character. That different style of character allows you to use different animations from services like Mixamo. I think it's provided by Adobe, so they have a bunch of animation presets you can use. Being able to create your own humanoid body really helps with that, and then you can just place any type of head on top of your character. You'll be able to see that in the future videos that I have whenever I get to it, because I do it multiple times, and that just gives us more variation, what type of things we can do in Blender and what type of games we can make with those characters inside of BuildBox. So I'm excited to get to those, and I'm trying to do this as quick as possible, as best as I can, but also very educational, because I want to look back at all these videos and actually rewatch them as if they were like a documentary of my own journey, because that's pretty cool to actually see from start to finish. What did I decide to create? And all those creations led to different ideas. Some of them succeeded, some of them failed. So it's not like everything is a success, and you can see how much hard work goes into every idea. It'll just showcase that game development isn't easy, much like a lot of things in life. But if it was easy, then everybody would be doing it. So that's why it's hard. I definitely think everyone can make games. It just takes a lot of patience, a lot of creativity, a lot of discipline, and a lot of ignoring of what other people say. Because there's a lot of naysayers that will say you're wasting your time with all this stuff. But from my experience, this has been the best thing that actually happened in my life, and it challenges me every day to actually get better. You actually learn a lot through game development, especially making all these new characters of mine. You have to really think about every little detail, just like I am with the eyes on character 2.3. You have to be very critical on the decisions you're making and just make decisions very quickly, because if you spend too much time on one thing, you definitely will never get to the end of the project. You definitely have to be aware and have time management, but also you get to be super creative, make some cool things where people wonder, how did you even come up with this? Because it's so bizarre or it's so unique that not many people can think about it on that type of level. I think it's cool. I met a lot of great people doing this. I see a lot of talent with a lot of game developers, but also artists. It's just cool to have traits of both of those occupations, because sometimes you either have one trait or the other, but for some reason I enjoy a little bit of everything. I've been learning a little bit about concept art, a little bit about 3D modeling, also visual scripting, and I occasionally play a lot of different games so that I can have some cool ideas that maybe I can remake for my own characters. This is going to be a pretty fun project, and I'm just excited to see what I create with all of these characters, but also documenting everything and seeing what I create in video form, because that's also another project if you think about it. The games itself, it's its own project, but then the bigger picture is actually documenting everything. So I'm working on multiple things simultaneously, and that's what I kind of chose to do, because I really want to get to a point where maybe I'll sell a course. That would be pretty cool to have different tutorials in there to do different things. Hopefully most of that will be tutorials of making a full game from start to finish, creating the idea from start to finish, and then creating the character from start to finish, and then creating the gameplay from start to finish, but also launching the game and the business side of things. I've always wanted to do all of this, but never really had the time, but now I have the time. So I'm trying to be as productive as possible and get this done as best as I can. At some point, it's all going to work out, and it's going to be pretty cool to get to that finish line. But until then, I just got to knock out these different characters and see what I come up with. For completing the eyes, definitely need to align the outside vertices to match the shape of character 2.3. That's the beauty of being able to have vertices, because even though things don't align correctly if you model them, you can always adjust them. So nothing is set in stone. Don't worry too much about messing up. You can see how my 3D models didn't really match the outside of the body, but we can always adjust that. You can do that with pretty much anything in Blender. So that's why I like the program a lot. I mean, I mentioned this before, 3D art just clicks in my head. I think it's because of the shape, and I'm able to see every side. So it allows me to actually visualize things as if they're in the real world, versus like 2D art, which is just super flat. And I can't really visualize it sometimes, especially for making animation. I just don't like the process of animation for 2D art, I guess. It's just different for me when I think about it, but maybe I'll give it a try again. I've tried pixel art and pixel art animation before. It was a lot of thinking for me. Normally, when I have to think with my brain a lot, that means I'm using a lot of my mental power, and that's something that I should stay away from, or it's going to take me a long time. I just like to find things where it's in a flow. My brain doesn't use too much mental energy. It's just on autopilot. That way I'll be able to do other things. That's what I'm noticing as I'm doing all these characters. Also these videos too. Like sometimes when I'm recording and making these videos, I can tell when I'm fatigued. And that's when I know to either take a break or just completely stop for the day, because then your body's just telling you, hey, you need to slow it down and maybe finish tomorrow. That's why I decided to record character 2.3 another day. I sometimes do multiple days for recording videos because some days I'm just in a really good flow, but some days I'm not. Today I'm actually in one of those good flows. So hopefully I'm able to record the entire video for this character in one go. Sometimes that doesn't happen. That's usually my goal, is just to be in a very, very good flow of things. Then I know I'm supposed to be working on this, because then it's natural. It comes out easily. I don't have to force it. When you force it, that means you're just using way too much energy, and that doesn't make sense. So things have to flow. I guess that's a tip that I would like to put out there. If you're doing something and it's just requiring so much of your time, energy, and focus that you're not completing anything at all, you're just using way too much energy, not getting anything done, that just means maybe you got to try something else that's just more aligned with your own strengths or your own passions or your own purpose, or just things that you enjoy where it's like more natural. That's what I do now, and that's why I like making all these videos now, because I'm just talking about the process of what I went through to get to this point, things that are in the video that I would like to narrate, things that I would want to keep a tab on. It's just natural for me to talk about those things because that's just what I want to talk about. Hopefully that makes sense. We just pretty much finished blocking out the body and the eyes for character 2.3. Now we move to UV unwrap, and as always, super simple. You can always start from the middle of the character and mark those seams. That's as simple as it gets, so that you understand that you just cut the shape right in the middle. So the front area is going to have its own UV, and then also the back area is going to have its own UV. You can stack them if you want to, if they're going to share the same color, or you can have them separate if you want to draw on one of them. Let's just say the front part, that you definitely want to keep them separate. For the eyes, we're definitely going to mark the seams on the back part. That's pretty straightforward. And I go into UV editing, add a new texture for character 2.3, and then add the material that has the image texture. Make sure to change this to the next character that you're working on. Otherwise, it will show the texture from the previous character because I'm reusing the materials. But this design on the body actually looks pretty cool. It's kind of like a pattern, or it looks like a cow's fur. That's actually pretty cool. I definitely could have used that. If I removed the new eyes, it already looks like the previous eyes were placed on top. So it's definitely something that I should consider. I've actually never done a pattern on my characters. Now that I'm looking at these videos, maybe I should try to do some patterns, because that would be pretty cool. Maybe have like polka dots or cow body, or what other patterns are there? Stripes. Maybe I'll try that. We'll definitely do that in a future character at some point. That way we'll get away from the solid gray colors. I really just like starting with the gray colors. It's just less thinking in terms of choosing colors and different color palettes. I do experiment with different color palettes for my current characters that I'm working on, just to see how that process is and whether it's more time consuming or if it flows naturally with my current workflow. So far, including colors is actually a good thing. It definitely makes my characters pop a little bit more, and it creates some variation with the grayscales that I've been using. We'll get to those videos hopefully soon. I'm also still trying to make that process a little bit more efficient so that I'm not spending too much time on the colors itself, where it's just easy as drag and drop, which is what I normally want to do, spend the least amount of time to just get things done. Whenever I get the process down, definitely going to implement more of that into my new characters. Here's a new thing that I started doing, and you're able to see it here for character 2.3. I'm actually marking the seams in front for the character. You can definitely visualize this if you've been following this character. The area that we pulled the edge loop creates some sort of shading. That's why I'm marking the seams around the front part of the character, because I'm trying to separate the shaded areas from the main color. And I had to knife into the shape here so that it makes sense for marking the seams. Hopefully you can visualize this on why I'm marking the seams this way. It'll make a lot more sense when I texture paint in the next part of the process. You can see we pretty much cut out the front part of character 2.3 out of our original UV. That's why we're left with two UVs, one for the outer part, which is basically the shading, and then the one on the right side, which is going to be the main color for character 2.3. Since the shape of this character takes up a lot of room, it's going to do so in our UVs. It's like very curvy and not squarish, so that takes up room in our texture space, which isn't good if we were using a lot of different UVs. A way to save space is to mark the seam at the bottom of the character. This is going to be in the UV for the shaded area. You see, marking the seam splits that UV into a very long strip. Now this definitely takes up a lot of room, because if you leave it like this, it's just pretty much wasting space, because you have those corners where you have to fill in and it just doesn't align with a lot of things. You can leave it like this, or you can just scale it down, but still that's definitely inefficient. One thing you can do is turn off UV sync selection first, otherwise it's going to be connected to the other UVs. Whatever vertices you changes the other UV, and you don't want that. On this add-on, I clicked Rectify. I've been manually doing it because you can actually right click it and click follow quads, but that pretty much straightens out that UV into a long rectangle. That way we can actually just move it on one of the sides of the texture space, and that saves a lot of space already. On this add-on, I clicked Rectify. I didn't even know that was there actually. I've been manually doing it because you can actually right click it and click follow quads, but that pretty much straightens out that UV into a long rectangle. That way we can actually just move it on one of the sides of the texture space, and that saves a lot of space already. We could even mark the seam at the top of this UV, and that will create smaller rectangles of the UV. That was something I was experimenting with, since I do want to improve on my UV unwrapping, because as we progress to the more complex characters, there's going to be way more UVs, and it's good to ease into it and understand the certain things you can do to save space. I guess there's a lot of different buttons to use in the UV layout tab that I never used before. It was interesting to see that I've actually done it in these videos, because I completely forgot. I usually just manually do it now. Also, if you press P, which I do on the front part of the UV, which is on the right side, it pins that UV to that location. Any changes you make to the UV on the left side doesn't affect the UV on the right side. That's a tip for UV editing. Once you're finished marking the seams and you cut out a shape that you like for a specific UV, you would just pin it to the side, and then you can unwrap any other UVs without messing up all your finished UVs that you put to the side. That's something I've been finding super helpful, because if you continuously just press unwrap, it will just revert everything back to the original. If you have all these pieces that you stacked on top of each other, aligned, rotated them, all of that, then you pretty much have to redo everything. That was the annoying part, because I did that so many times. I wanted to figure out a way to keep the UVs that I like. That was pretty much the method. I guess it's good to experiment with your add-ons, which I don't remember doing, but I guess I do so in this video. But now I know there's that Rectify button that I could have just clicked for most of my UVs. So that's super helpful that I'm seeing that in this video. You guys don't have to worry about that for your characters. See, that's why I like recording these videos. I just catch things that I didn't catch before. Like, I learn things and I do them, but then I don't notice that I'm doing them until I actually review the videos and then actually narrate what I'm doing. It just brings more awareness to what I'm doing, because I'll tell you, most of this is unconscious when I'm doing it, like creating the characters on autopilot. I feel that's just how I feel when I create these characters. It's like time definitely passes by and I don't know all the things that I did, but I know at the end of the day, I finished the character and then it was completed and I animated it and we popped it into Buildbox. I'm just doing things super fast, pretty much in the zone. By the time I finish, I'm just like, wow, I didn't realize I did that much work. You're only able to see that is if you actually record everything. Otherwise, you actually don't know what you do every day unless you record your entire day and watch it, which I don't know a lot of people do. Maybe they do now because we have social media and everything can be recorded and posted online, so there's no issues of running out of space. A lot of my videos are on hard drives, and definitely recording videos takes a lot of memory. I definitely got to find a better way of storage to keep everything in the cloud. I'm constantly just thinking of things where I can improve, not only in game development, but I guess outside of it. That's why I'm talking about recording videos. Requires a lot of memory. There's like things that I'm thinking about that I'm trying to improve. Back to the UVs. I guess I didn't keep the rectangle, most likely because I saw those smaller UVs and then I thought there was something wrong. I definitely could have kept that long rectangle instead of keeping it the way it is, but that was my thought process at the time. The shaded area, which is the one I'm scaling down, that one can be small because it's going to be a solid color and we don't need to do much for the texture in that location. But for the main color, which is the one on the left side, we'll definitely need to draw the mouth of some sort. I could have actually cut the head in half, but you can see the shape of this character just takes up room on the texture space, and it's just a very odd shape, but it's fine because it's just one character, so it's not really an issue, I guess. And then I unwrap the UVs for the eyes, and this one also has a little bit of curve, somewhat circular. Doesn't really take up too much space, I guess, when you have them together like this. That's really what I'm thinking about when I'm doing UV unwrapping. Like this portion, I think about aligning the UVs so that it fits nicely in that square. I haven't gotten to the complex textures just yet, but I know if you start practicing earlier on, like getting the shapes aligned, fitting them nicely in place, practicing on different textures, how it affects the quality. If you practice doing that, if you're doing it daily like I am for all the characters that I'm working on, then you'll eventually start improving on that process and finding better ways to fit all your UVs into your texture. But the other thing that I've always been thinking about is having one master texture file and having all the UVs from across all my characters or all my separate objects using the master texture file. And then we won't have to worry too much about aligning everything because I can just scale the UVs down to a specific location on the texture that has a certain color that I like. That would just make everything much easier. But for some areas where you need to draw on them, like the eyes and the mouth, those definitely need to be kept their original size, I guess, to avoid any pixelation on the character. That's what I wanted to come up with. But yeah, I know you guys are gonna look at my UVs during the early concepts of my characters and tell me how that's a waste of space. That's okay. I want to hear that feedback actually, to see if I'm doing a good job or I'm doing a bad job, because I really don't know. To me, it actually works. Well, it's just for each character, it doesn't take up that much room. So I haven't gotten to the part where I pretty much fill the texture with a whole bunch of UVs and different colors and different designs. I haven't gotten to that part yet. We'll definitely get there. Because I know the current characters that I'm working on, there's a lot of UVs that I have to stack. And I end up cutting corners because I know I have to get through the process much faster and not spend way too much time trying to get the perfect UV. Just more so making sure they all fit into the texture space. Definitely I can see some improvements that I've been doing on this entire process. You can definitely see that if you've been watching from the beginning of my videos. Definitely check out all of my previous characters if you haven't already. Check out the Blender videos, check out the build blocks videos. You'll definitely learn a lot. And you can see my improvements. You can also see the things that I've been changing along the ways, just so that everything becomes much more efficient and that I'm not spending too much time on each of the processes in each workflow. But also, like, behind the scenes, you don't really see the process of putting these videos together too. There's like a whole bunch of workflows going on. Like, recording the videos can be its own content on how I actually record these videos, how I narrate them, and how I combine them into one video. That's a process on its own, but you actually don't see that part. If you guys are interested in seeing that, quite possibly, maybe I'll make a video about that. Just leave it in the comments saying you also want to see the process of your video editing of some sort. Maybe I'll do that too. That'll just be another thing as part of the documenting process to showcase all of the work that I'm putting into this project. That will help you make your own decisions on whether you want to do this. Because I really want to do this. It's actually fun for me now because I've gotten to the flow of things. And I really just like seeing the work that I've been doing and just bringing characters alive, bringing them to reality, and just seeing some fun ideas that I create. Hopefully hearing all the reviews from people about all these games that I put out. Hopefully I finish multiple of these games, and that's just going to be a very fun process. It's been a very, very long journey. The first part was about 10 years ago. That's how long I've been doing this. But that journey was very different on how I created games. I'd be the project manager and the creative director. I come up with the ideas. I would talk to the artists to create the art. Also, I would send that art to my programmer so they can put it into the code. That was a very, very different process of creating games. Now that process changes with the project that I'm working on now, which is all these characters. I'm actually the artist. I'm using BuildBox, which allows me to be the programmer as well, since it's all visual scripting. I understand that system. But it's pretty cool to just have everything under one person. I can manage everything much more efficiently. I don't have to go back and forth between people. So I find it easier now with this process, even though I'm doing all of the work, but then I'm able to create content about it because that was something I couldn't do before. This is going to be a very, very fun journey to go on. I've already started. There's no turning back now. I'm just going to go for it like I've always have and then see whatever I come up with. But we pretty much finished the UVs for character 2.3. This is how I chose to align it. Not very efficient, actually, the way it looks right now. Definitely could have did a better job. If you think I could have did a better job, let me know in the comments. For sure, I could have saved up a lot more space. Definitely by rectifying some of the UVs and also splitting up the character, possibly the tail, the body, and the head as separate UVs. But that's okay. That's definitely something I would do now if I was doing the unwrapping for this character today. But at the time, that's probably what I thought was the best. That's fine too, because during that time, I wasn't really efficient at UV unwrapping anyways. So you can definitely hear the improvements as I'm explaining them on the things that I would do. So hopefully that's helpful for you. But if you need to see it in video form, we'll definitely get to that in the next few characters. Be sure to be on the lookout for that. That brings us into texture paint, where we get to color character 2.3, and then it'll make a lot of sense why I cut certain UVs. And that's the only real way to explain this, is by actually showcasing, okay, these are the UVs that we cut. Okay, now why did we cut them that way? Because it makes it easier to texture paint, and you're able to see that now in the texture paint portion. And I don't know if I did this before or not. This actually might be new because I don't remember narrating this part. Maybe I did. I gotta review that. I created a new tab. I'm not sure if this tab was in the previous videos or not. It's called Pixel Texture because I was using it for something else, but the layout is what's helpful to do texture painting because you have character 2.3 on the upper left is where you can see the texture on the 3D model, and then the bottom left is where you can see the UVs in the texture file. And on the big screen on the right, where you select the different faces on your 3D model, and then you can switch into texture paint without any issues from edit mode. You're just able to see everything from a bird's eye view. I really like this setup for texture painting. So I've definitely been using this a lot for my current characters. It's just easy to see everything on the screen. And then by having everything on the screen, it just makes it easier to explain everything and narrate because you can see multiple things happening on the screen. That's just better for the video because then otherwise I'll just be talking about something and you won't even notice unless you're able to see it. Before we texture paint, we always need to check the face orientation, and we normally have to do this because we use the plane method, so the shape is always going to be flipped, which is red, and that's incorrect. So we need to flip the normals so that they become blue, and then we're able to texture paint correctly, letting us draw on top of the 3D model. So definitely do this before you texture paint. In object mode, you select the object that you want to paint. If you're in edit mode, you can select a specific UV that you want to paint, or select all of them so you can paint the whole thing. You go into texture paint and then use the paint bucket and select a color. I chose the gray, and then you click the object and it fills in the color. So the gray fills in the body because that's what we selected as the 3D mesh that we want to paint. So you're able to see all of that happening on the 3D model on the left side, but also is showing what's happening in your texture on the bottom left. You can see that area of our UVs is filled with gray. If we want to paint the eyes, you just go back into object mode, select the eyes, and then go to texture paint. Clicking that square button at the top lets you select specific faces that you want to texture paint as well. So that's the usefulness of that. I'll explain that later on because I'm definitely going to be using a different shade for the different parts that we cut out. For the eyes, I chose the white color, and you can see it appear on the left side of the 3D model, but also the texture space. If you also want to see it on the right side, you can switch to material preview mode, and then it also appears on the right side for you. You can zoom in on this side if you need to. So that definitely gives you more perspectives, so you can see things from different views. Like the right side is a close-up view, and then the left side is a far away view. So you can see what the character looks like from different angles. Don't forget to save the texture, because that's definitely important for this part, because I'm going to be filling in the pupil, but also when I click undo, sometimes it gets rid of the texture, and you don't want that happening for all your coloring that you've already done. And on the right side, I can always go into X-ray mode to see my reference. This is why I like this view. It's because you can do multiple things all at once and just still be able to see everything without losing the different windows. That's the cool thing about it. Definitely use this view if you find it useful, because I definitely do. I just like to have everything on the screen. The brush is a little bit too soft. You can see it's kind of like feathered around the black area for our pupil, and that it looks not good to me. That's because we're zoomed in that it looks like that. Probably doesn't look like that from far away. If you want a harder brush, you just go to fall off and then click the sideways bracket. You can also move the graft as well, but then that creates a more harder brush and shows the texture a little bit more like how I normally want it. These are just placeholders for the character. So you might be thinking, that's horrible painting on your character. You know, it's just for placeholders so we can get the prototype out. If I want to redo it, I can always do it later on, because we always have the texture that we saved, and I can always go in and refine it and update it with better textures at another time. We just need to get this character done. But the eye actually looks pretty good. I'm actually getting better using the mouse to fill in the textures. You got to paint a little bit more slower so that you can be a bit more accurate, because swiping really fast doesn't make everything smoother. But I actually do that all the time because I want to get this done fast, but then it doesn't come out right. So you actually have to take your time. Drawing on the eyes actually looks pretty good for character 2.3. It definitely has to do with our faces on our 3D model and also the UVs. The texture actually looks correct for some reason, because I know in the previous characters, when I would draw on the 3D model, it would come out super zigzaggy. You can see the texture comes out really good now, because I'm drawing more straight lines in my textures versus zigzag lines, which is what was happening with my previous characters. This is definitely something to create more unique textures, if that's something that you want to do. Definitely take a look at how I did my previous eyes and compared to character 2.3. You can see the differences between the textures of the two. This is the first time I'm able to draw directly on top of my textures and it coming out exactly like how I'm drawing it. You can see the texture for the eyes wraps really nicely on the 3D model of the eyes. That's why the texture is coming out much more smooth. And then I'm drawing the mouth on the head of character 2.3. This actually looks pretty identical too. It definitely matches the reference. You can always go in and clean up some of the edges if you don't like these hard lines, but I definitely do. I've always wanted to make a mix of the two, where it's like 3D models and pixel art on top. I've actually experimented doing so in the past, but pixel art is an interesting art of its own. Definitely requires a lot of practice. I can do some basic, simple pixel art, but to get the super detailed, complex pixel art takes a lot of time. So that's why I stick with more 3D art now, because it's just easier to just fill in colors at the moment versus thinking about each pixel, what color it is, and thinking about different unique styles like dithering, which is a way to get like shading to show in your pixel art. So that was something that I've learned. I do have some videos for some of the pixel art / 3D models that I made. So maybe I'll just put that out. If you guys are interested in seeing that, let me know in the comments or something that you want to see the pixel art and 3D models, and I'll show you some of the things that I worked on. I have the videos, but I just never really considered them in some games. Maybe I'll use them actually, because it looks pretty unique. That's pretty good for the mouth actually. I'm constantly analyzing my UVs and the texture paint to see how I can do more of this for my future characters. It looks like it's easier to paint on top of your 3D models if you have large faces. So that's why the mouth is actually showing much better normally than my previous characters, is because that area has one face, so the texture can actually wrap nicely over the face of the 3D model. Definitely, if I do more low poly models with big faces, I'll be able to wrap more of the texture on top and it'll come out nicely. That pretty much finishes the texture paint portion. That looks pretty identical to character 2.3. I still have to think of a name for this character. I don't know if I came up with it just yet, other than, oh, I think I said it's like some sort of abstract version of Mew. It looks like that because of the tail. I think that's what he looks like. But then the body, I guess the body kind of looks like that too, but not the head though. Definitely not the head. The head just kind of looks like, I can't think of it. But then when we add the outline to this character, it'll definitely look like my reference. All the characters are actually looking pretty spot on. I'm actually happy on the way all of them turned out. I'm excited to just work on all of them because it's like a challenge of your creativity. You get to see what cool things you come up with every day, and then it builds and builds, and you can apply it for any of the characters. Whatever I learned with this character can be applied to my future characters, but also it can be applied to my previous characters. Maybe I found something that's much more efficient. Now I can always go back and refix things if I felt like the UVs were off or the texture could have been much better if I did a certain thing. Anything I do in regards to any of the characters can be applied to each other. And then the new mechanics that I come up with, I can always reuse them for any of the characters if I feel like this mechanic works for a specific character. This brings us to the next portion, rigging with Rectify, so we can add some bones, and then we can finally get some movement into this character later on in the animation portion. In order to do that, we need to rotate the character -90 degrees because, like I said, it's super long. It's not good to take up that much space on the screen for a game, especially since I make mobile games. The screen real estate isn't all that much. Rotating it to the side where we have the character straightened out allows us to fully utilize this character so that it's vertical now. Now that we rotated it, it looks like his tail is holding him up, like he's some sort of genie. We can actually add some sort of lantern. Actually, he can become a genie type character. That's actually a pretty good idea. Maybe I'll create some sort of lantern, so at least it makes sense. And that tail can actually be part of his body, so he's like some sort of spirit-like character. We definitely need to move the right eye. It just looks weird at the top of the head like this. Doesn't look right to me. It should at least be on the right side of the face. So I rotate it and we move it to the side. This looks much better for the placement of the right eye. I'm just aligning the left eye as well, and just need to fix some of the vertices here, or move the shape closer so that we don't have this gap between the eye and the body. But I can also use the shrink wrap modifier that will pretty much connect the eye and the body. But I don't know if I do that, but maybe I do, because that's definitely my go-to for the eyes. If they're separate, I always shrink wrap them to the body. I'm really surprised that I thought of him as a genie because I never visualized that before, but now watching these videos, definitely looks like a genie. So this character is Genie. Maybe that's what we call it. G the Genie is the name, quite possibly. G the Genie. So possibly see what I come up with for character 2.3, G the Genie. I really like that name actually. All right, let's get back to rigging. We're definitely gonna need the basic spine. That's pretty self-explanatory. The body needs to have some sort of spine. I'm lining this with the curve of the body. We also need the head. The head usually comes with the neck bone as well. The neck usually connects to the spine, so that's how that works. The bone that I'm moving here is the head bone. Extruded a new bone. I definitely didn't need to do that, but I guess, did I extrude? Yeah, I extruded a new bone. That's pretty much for the head. The smaller bones that I'm aligning is for the neck. We need the tailbone, so we can have some bones for the tail, or the genie smoke if this had a lantern. For the tail, I extruded a whole bunch of bones just so that we can get this curve. I'm trying to think whether or not I should make a lantern actually. That might be a good idea. That's probably how I'll expand some of these characters because they're very abstract they can become anything at any point. The next form of this character could be the genie. So I might redraw it actually, but keep the characteristics or a similar shape so that you can see the evolution between the two. That'd be pretty cool content to watch and create. Now we need to parent them to their specific bones. I parented the tail to the spine bone, and you can see that connection point. And then I parented the neck to the spine bone. The layer names is head, head tweak, spine, spine FK, spine tweak, tail, tail tweak, and eyes. You can see that I'm always just using the same naming conventions for everything. It's pretty much the same thing that I'm doing for all the characters. The only thing that's changing is the details of the character or the characters itself, but the process itself doesn't really change unless I find something that's much more efficient. Then the process changes. I'm pretty much doing the same thing every time I'm creating these characters. So the method is easily understandable and easily repeated if you just see the pattern. I see things in patterns, and you can always repeat the pattern, and that's how you create things. Especially in Blender, it's always the same pattern for me. If you write down the pattern, you just need to learn that specific workflow and that specific framework, and you'll always be able to create things with that. Same thing, we're going to add separate bones. For the eyes, we're going to make them basic super copies. Always make sure you go to the side view so you can see how you align the bones. Just look around your character in different views to make sure the bones are aligned. If you look at it from the front view, it looks aligned, but when you move it to the side, you can see that not everything is aligned because we're in a 3D space. Don't forget to do that, or you could just keep it the way it is. I honestly think it works regardless of aligning, except if you keep it this way, the 3D mesh will just deform in a weird shape, depending on where you left your bones. Since we're going to parent them together, and then rename the eyes, IR for the right eye, and IL for the left eye, and then parent the eyes to the head bone, and move the bones to their specific layers. To see if you moved each bone to the correct layer, just press the window button, and your bones will appear. If it's not on the correct layer, you can always move them to the layer over or the layer backwards, and then move them to a separate row, and then choosing a value from this standard theme so you can color code your different layers on your rig. Once you're done with that entire process, you just go back to edit mode. This is where you can click the generate rig button. Whenever I get to this part, I plan to join the separate objects into one object. This is a good time to create your backup, duplicate your collection, and then write a description that will help you remember what this backup is. I decided to put up right. It also could have been backup. It was really up to you on how you want to separate it, so you understand what that folder is for your character. I have this in video form, so I can always refer back to it. If you're not recording everything in video form, then definitely keep some sort of spreadsheet to help you remember what that backup folder was. That's something that you can do in written form if that's easier for you. There's always ways to keep references for yourself. And whatever works for you, definitely do it, because there's just no way to remember everything if you don't have it all recorded in video form or written form. Once you have the backup, you can just join all the objects like I'm doing for character 2.3. And then you can generate the rig, hide your meta rig, parent the body to the rig, and then go into pose mode. Be sure to check in front so you can see all your rig layers. Now you get to have fun. Check in to see what each layer does to deform your character, to see what you can do for animation purposes. And I normally like to select that torso layer and then move it up and down. You can see that the torso layer moves the whole body of character 2.3. It takes it off of the ground. That was actually something that I didn't want to happen. The way I resolved it in my current characters is by adding a leg bone. There should have been a leg bone where the tail is, because the leg bone actually keeps it grounded so that the tail would actually be standing, and when you move the torso, it wouldn't affect the entire 3D model, if that makes sense. It'll definitely make sense in one of the future videos, because I end up adding the leg to a lot of characters just so that I can have the character grounded to the floor like that. I forgot to move the FK and tweak layers for each of the bones. Don't forget to do that. You have to do that in pose mode. It's usually just after the dot, which is the layer you moved your original bones. That's how I remember it. And then you just go back to object mode and regenerate the rig, and it will update your rig. Anytime you need to make updates to your rig, you can just unhide your meta rig that you started with, and this is the one with all the bones, and then make all your changes and then just regenerate, and then you'll fix your new rig. This part's pretty fun. After you finished rigging your character, it's just fun to see what grabbing each layer does. Like here, I'm grabbing the head and the neck and seeing what movements we can create to give this character some life. That was a pretty quick explanation of the rigging process. We pretty much finished rigging character 2.3, and we're going to get to animation. For animation, I started creating an extra view on the left side for the action editor. This was in the previous character. I forget when I started integrating it, but this is very important for the animation process. Since I've been coming up with multiple different animations, having the action editor is super helpful to separate and organize each animation. For character 2.3, you can see I grab the torso layer and moving it up and down actually lifts the character off the floor. And the reason this happens is because we don't have a leg bone so that the leg will be grounded. We only have the tail connected since the bottom of the character is a tail, but that actually doesn't ground the character for animation. That's why I'm testing out different layers to see what movements we can do for this character. Moving it up and down like this, he definitely looks like a genie at this point. I know I mentioned it earlier in the video. That's what I'm visualizing right now. So quite possibly version 2 will resemble some sort of genie if I do redraw this character or recreate it. That'd be kind of cool actually, to have some sort of evolution of these abstract characters into something more defined. I've actually never considered that. I kind of just drew all these characters and said I was going to make them and then use them into some mechanics. It would be pretty cool to redraw them and see what else I can do for specific characters. I'm not going to redraw all of them, but I guess that would be a pretty fun side project. And one of the spine FK layers, I guess I liked the movement for that layer. So I'm keyframing the current position at frame 0. And I'm moving down by -0.15. And I accidentally keyframed this at frame 0, so I moved it to the 10th frame so I can redo the keyframe. For some reason in the action editor, which is the left view, you can see my keyframes at 0 and 10th frame, but at the bottom where the timeline is, there are no keyframes. It's definitely being recorded because you can see the summary, but normally it shows in the timeline, so that's a bit odd. And if this happens to you, I think pressing the home button will bring back the keyframes in the timeline, and that's what happened to me. I honestly thought that I was doing something wrong, but I think the keyframes were just being hidden. You just press the home button and it should show. And I probably show that later on in the video as I'm scrubbing through. Right now I'm just keyframing the different movements for character 2.3. And you can see I duplicated the keyframes in the action editor. It definitely works doing so there. But for me, I like doing it in the timeline because you can actually press play and have it loop correctly. So it's a little bit weird that it wasn't showing at the time. There shouldn't be any difference animating in the action editor and the timeline. It's pretty much the same thing. You definitely have a lot more options doing it with the action editor. So if you're doing some complex animations, definitely have that open for the animations. This movement for character 2.3 is going to be some sort of idle animation. And the reason why I chose the spine FK layer is because it doesn't lift the character off the ground. So you can actually just animate it in place. And that's what I normally look for the first animation for most of my characters. I don't want them to lift off the ground. I just want them to animate in place. We would have been able to do this with a different layer if we had a leg bone, but we definitely don't. That's why I selected some of these layers in the tail to see if I can animate character 2.3 in a way where the character is bouncing on its tail. That's what I wanted originally for the animation for this character, but I couldn't do it at the time. So I might need to go back to this at some point to maybe redo the rig so that I can get the leg bone in, and then I can just easily animate it how I originally wanted it. But this up and down movement for the body is perfectly fine anyways. I definitely like it. It really matches character 2.3. Now rewatching this, scaling the tail in and out really shows me that this might be a genie character. So that's a direction I would like to take this character. Quite possibly I could just recolor it as well using some sort of blue color, somewhat similar to the color of the genie in Aladdin. If you guys are familiar with that movie, I don't know, that's what I'm thinking about right now. So quite possibly we'll see character 2.3 as a blue genie, and I might tweak the hue or something to go with a different variation of a blue or a purple. or a green. So that's definitely something I'll consider. Some of these tweak layers for the tail I found to be useful. So I keyframed this position for the tail tweak layers, and you can select multiple layers at once and animate all of them at the same time, and it will keyframe the same movement for each of those layers. So that makes it easy if you want to animate multiple rig layers with Rectify. Like I said, I wanted a up and down movement for this character, and this works perfectly with the body movement that we had earlier. So it's not like he's bouncing in place, but he's actually doing it with his tail. So that's what I was visualizing at the time. That's mainly what I do with most of these characters. I just look at them, whatever I'm feeling for the movement is whatever I go with. And this is before even bringing it into BuildBox to consider a mechanic for it. I just know that an idle animation always works as your first animation. And once you drop that in to BuildBox, you'll eventually come up with other animations that you'll need. And then you can always go back into Blender and create a new action and then just add on to your list of animations for your characters. So that's my process. I try not to do too much at once. Keep it simple. Get one animation, get it out the way, see how it looks, drop it into BuildBox or whatever game engine you're using, and then get some more ideas, and then come up with some new animations. And each animation will definitely help you out for your future characters. And I've definitely been learning a whole bunch with all of my characters. The current characters that I'm working on, I've actually done like 5 or 6 animations, and they're all very different. So I have like an idle animation, walk animation, run animation, jump animation, and I had a flying animation for one of the flying characters. So I've been experimenting with different animation cycles just because it's challenging me, but also it's super fun to come up with different things. And I know this is all going to be compounded with some of the future characters, and it'll all be worth it. So whenever I get to those videos, you'll be able to see those pretty cool animations that I came up with. Hopefully that inspires you to create your own animations. I know Blender is a little bit scary to work with if you kind of look at it, watching other people use it, them making incredible art. It gets to your head if you're a beginner, but what I can say is I was also a beginner, and I still consider myself to be one. So don't be afraid to give it a try if you've always wanted to create some cool 3D characters and just have some fun. That's pretty much on my mind when I'm creating all these characters. I really don't think about the technicals too much. I do have a cheat sheet in my notes. If I do forget some hotkeys that are definitely needed for specific processes, that's like a helpful reminder that I would have for myself. And eventually it becomes muscle memory because you've worked with it so many times that now you know what to do the next time in this process. And each layer can be moved, rotated, or scaled. So you can get some pretty interesting movements with your characters. Like I'm doing a rotation here for various tweak layers, and rotating it deforms the 3D model in specific ways. So sometimes it gives you an interesting movement. So it's like he's tilting his body forward and back. So that's what I look for mainly, is just moving things, try to get some sort of interesting animation, and don't worry too much about the specifics. I keep it simple. I have like 60 frames, sometimes 80. You mainly have to do the 10th, 20th, 30th, and 40th frame, and then you can just duplicate it for 50, 60, 70, and 80th, and that will create the loop for you. And that's pretty much my type of animations for all of my characters. Fairly simple. Try not to overthink it too much, because then you end up not creating any animations at all. And you can see in the summary, it's all the rig layers that I've moved. And I really like using the action editor now because you have the ability to click those check marks if you want to mute a specific rig layer, or you can duplicate multiple keyframes for all the rig layers at once. There's a lot of things you can do. I'm pretty sure you could do a lot more. That's just all I've been using it for. When renaming the animation, I try to keep the same naming conventions. The last character was character 2_2_ walk animation and headbend animation. To make it easy, you can just copy the previous name and then just paste it for this animation and then change it to 2_3 since our character is 2.3, and then just put idle animation. That's pretty much the animation for character 2.3, the Genie. To complete the animation, we just need to create our for outline. As always, if you need to know the exact process, refer to the previous videos. I've explained it multiple times. I'm just pretty much just fast tracking everything now. Now for my current characters, I'll be fast forwarding everything so I can focus on finishing these videos much faster, since I definitely want to get to some of the newer characters. Look at this outline. It really looks awesome, knowing that the sketch has an outline, so every time I add it, I can really see my character that I drew. It brings a sense of realness, so that's what's really cool about it. And we're pretty much finished with character 2.3, the Genie. So that concludes this video. I'm trying my best to explain as much as I can without being repetitive, but also trying to make everything a little bit more exciting and fun for the videos. I want to narrate more characters and try to get through as many as I can. Hope you learned a lot about character 2.3. What are some things that stood out for character 2.3? I know earlier in the process, we were doing some edge slides. So that kind of gave us some shading on our character, and we were able to color that in texture paint. And the shading really helps with a 3D model to make it pop more in a sense. I'm actually working on that portion, trying to get a better understanding of color, light, and shading. So that's something that I do look into in my future characters. I don't have anything else to add because I can't really think of anything right now. But if you like this video, please hit the like button. Let me know what you think about the new way I'm narrating. If you like it, hit the like button. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. If you want more tutorials, put that in the comments as well. I try my best to do the tutorials within the thought process videos. As long as it's something that I haven't explained multiple times, then I'll thoroughly explain in the video. But if it's in a previous character, definitely take a look at those. Yeah. So check out the next video for seeing the mechanic that I come up with for character 2.3. We'll be using build blocks. So yeah, please like and subscribe. See you next video. Peace.